Marshlee and her job interview. One day, Marshlee the mushroom realized that she was getting tired of being poor and homeless. She dearly needed a job and a fat salary. She dreamed of big money that could buy her the things she wanted in life so that she could settle down as a happy, contented mushroom. Marshlee was a mobile mushroom who loved to roam, but to her dismay, some people in the garden, especially the roses, made fun of her nomadic ways. They called her a tramp, a vagabond, and this really bothered her. She was tired of the gossip about her lifestyle and wanted to end her wanderings. For a start, she wanted that egg-shaped dream house that floated above Kikri the coconut's big nodding head. It cost a bomb, and Marshlee needed a well-paying job in order to buy the place. And she also wished to own one of those flying cars that flitter the flutterby, made for people like her who couldn't fly. So she went to Mark and Henry's, the employment agency run by the meerkats who offered all sorts of jobs to the inhabitants of the magic garden. Mr. Mark greeted her cordially, took her application and asked her to sit. Marshlee sat on a rock chair and waited. He said, "Hi Marshlee, I'm Mark. Welcome to the interview. What sort of employment are you seeking, Marshlee?" She cleared her throat and said,
"Any job that's respectable with a decent salary, Mr. Mark."
Mr. Mark smiled and said, "My, you're quite ambitious. How many languages do you speak?" Marshlee replied,
"Oh, I speak quite a few, Mr. Mark. Except Rose, I speak all of them. I can even talk to the sea and most of its inhabitants. Everyone says only the warden, the singer, speaks more languages than I."
Mr. Mark nodded and said, "Wish you had learned to speak Rose too, miss, because we might have just the job for you, a job that would require you to speak the language of the roses." He looked at his partner, hinting that it was his turn to quiz her. The latter looked at her and queried, "What are your strengths, Miss Marshlee, and your weaknesses, if any?" Marshlee thought for a few seconds and said,
"Well, I'm a mobile mushroom, and my friends call me brave and adventurous. Sometimes I think that's a strength. As for weaknesses, I often feel small and insignificant, especially when I see the bigger creatures in the garden that tower above me."
Mr. Henry nodded, looked at his partner and said, "Could we put her in the royal palace? She could fit in perfectly, wouldn't she?" Mr. Mark looked at Marshlee for a moment and nodded in agreement. He said, "She could, if she spoke Rose." Mr. Henry turned to her, cleared his throat and said slowly, as if to stress the importance of his words, "Well, Marshlee, we have a job for you. It's in the royal palace, especially in the palace garden. As you might know, the princess is very fond of her roses. They need constant tending and care, and the point is, the princess needs a rose keeper. That's the job in a nutshell. If you speak rose, the language of the roses, the job's yours, miss." Marshlee listened to Mr. Henry's words. She wasn't convinced. How could just one language be so important? She thought. Mr. Mark seemed to read her thoughts. He said, "It's the palace, Marshlee, and the princess rules there. She loves her roses, and if you want to be looking after them, you must speak rose too." Marshlee understood. She said,
"Could you give me a week to learn Rose? Hopefully, I'll learn the language by then."
The meerkats nodded happily and said, "That's the spirit. See you soon, Miss Marshlee." The interview was over. Marshlee walked out of the office in deep thought. She knew she wanted the job very much, but the roses in the Mama's magic garden were so rude. Would she be able to convince them to teach her their language? With this on her mind, she walked to the water tank where she met the singer. He was sitting on the tank talking to Mama. Frankie the frog was there too. He croaked.
"How did the interview go, Marshlee?"
She told him about the palace job.
"The princess loves her roses apparently, Frankie. So I have to learn Rose. That's the problem."
Frankie nearly choked.
"Learn Rose? That's ridiculous. Who would want to listen to that silly language?"
he thought. The singer had heard the exchange between them. He intervened, saying, "Why this dislike for the dainty Rose? She's quite nice as a flower goes. She comes in red, blue, and yellow and seems like a friendly fellow. Some have a nasty tongue, true, but that's something we already knew. Folks, it's nothing new. Marshlee shook her head and said,
I don't know why, but they think I'm a little guy.
They think I'm a girl about.
Just because I can move about. They call me a silly tramp. I daren't go near the camp. I'm a midget, they're monstrous. I'm tiny, they're humongous.
The singer laughed, and Mama joined in the merriment. She said,
You're a giant too, in your own way, Marshlee. You're a great example of your tribe. Don't be shy to seek help. I'll tell you a secret about the roses in the magic garden. They want to be pampered. They want to be fussed about. They're attention seekers. I'm sure you'll be successful if you use this knowledge carefully.
Marshlee understood Mama's message. She nodded happily and went to the rose bushes confidently. Seeing her, they sniggered. Look who is arrived. It's the tramp, the vagabond. What does she want now? Marshlee picked up her courage and said,
Please teach me your tongue. If you do, I'll tend to you unsung.
I'll water your roots and prune your shoots.
The chief rose, a regal blue, cut in with. That's not enough, my dear. You got to give us more, I fear. Marshlee thought for a moment and said,
Okay, I'll teach you to dance and walk. I promise this isn't just silly talk.
The pink rose laughed and said, Dance? We can't move. How can we groove? The singer came to Marshlee's rescue. He sang, From this moment, upon this instant, the roses of this garden, says its warden, shall walk and run and have all the fun. Lo and behold, the roses grew legs and took a few faltering steps. They were so overjoyed, they soon came out of their void to teach without a grudge Marshlee their language. The princess came out of her palace to watch the walking rose bushes, who had lost their usual malice and were all smiles and blushes. Soon Marshlee learned to speak rose and was made the royal rose keeper, which brings our story to a close, and we'll meet again in The Mystery of the Interloper.